Welcome to Talk Advocacy to Me, the podcast that dives deep into the world of customer advocacy and loyalty. I'm your host, Liz Richardson, and I'm joined by my dynamic co-host, Deena Zenyk. We're the co-founders of Captivate Collective, and we're here to spark your curiosity and fuel your passion for all things customer advocacy. Each episode, we tackle hot and pressing customer engagement topics for the advocurious to the seasoned pro. So let's dive in and talk advocacy. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk Advocacy to Me, where we talk about one specific question in the world of customer marketing and advocacy. Today, we are talking about how do you create a community and customer advocacy flywheel. Very exciting topic, especially all of you who are touching, maybe even co-own or co-run your community plus your advocacy initiatives. With me today, as always, I have Deena Zenyk, the Chief Customer Officer at Captivate Collective. I'm your host, Liz Richardson, also the Chief Revenue Officer at Captivate Collective. And our guest today is a very special guest to me because I absolutely love him. We have DeMario Bell with us today. He is the Senior Community Manager in the Global Marketing Practice at Culture Amp. And DeMario, I'm going to just talk through some of what you've told me about yourself. And I love that one of the first things that DeMario has written here is that he is a first-generation college graduate. You know what? My husband is also a first-generation college graduate, so that is very near and dear to my heart. So congratulations on how far you've come. And if you don't know how far DeMario's come, you should just look at the list of his credentials here. The guy is at his peak. Well, no, you've got a long way to go, I know, but this is pretty impressive. So he is leading the digital strategy and operations for Culture First Community at Culture Amp. And this is a network of over 100,000 HR professionals, so a very large community coming together to share best practices, ideate, and connect. But if we talk about him personally and his achievements in just the last year or two, let's name some here. Named LinkedIn's top community voice in 2023. Wow. And in 2024, CMX honored him as best B2B community professional and best growth marketing community. And he was also named by BASE as one of the 2024 top 100 influencers and strategists. So you've had quite the year, DeMario.
I have, and thank you for that introduction, Deena. Thank you for having me. What a year 2023 and 2024 has been for me, and I'm so blessed that I'm able to have this platform and to be able to support, edify, and encourage, fellow community builders and customer marketers who, at the heart, what we're wanting to do is drive more value for our customers at our organizations, and so to be able to, be a player in that means a lot. And I'll say this. Liz and Deena, the rewards and the awards and the recognition, they're nice, but it's not why I do this work. I'm in service to the work. I'm in service to the people that I want to do what the work requires. And it's platforms like yours that allow me to amplify not only my voice, but really the voice of the folks who have a real hand in this. There are 100,000 names that we did not mention in that introduction who deserve, that recognition as well. So thank you for that call out.
Awesome. I would expect nothing less from such a generous and kind person as DeMario. DeMario, I know you also have a heart for diversity and inclusion, and so I want to make sure we mention that as well. So thank you so much for being part of our talk today. And now let's get into some meat and potatoes. But first of all of you joining us on the LinkedIn Live stream, please feel free to leave questions as part of this conversation as they arise. But today we're really going to dig into what DeMario has accomplished with this concept of a flywheel between customer advocacy and community. So I'm really excited to get into this. So, just DeMario, what does customer advocacy and community flywheel mean to you?
Yeah, so I'm ready to dive right into this, and thank you for that, Liz. And so I would say, the core idea that I want to share with those who are watching in is that there's this symbiotic relationship between community and customer advocacy, and that this relationship between the two create this powerful flywheel effect. Which can, drive more sustained engagement and growth for not only our programs, but for our organizations as well. I come from the world of alumni relations and development. I'll share more about that later on, but I love all things about engaging with people. I love about influencing others, understanding people motivations to do what they do. And I love stewarding relationships, more importantly, in our community, our culture first community at CoTramp. And so I believe that if we tap into those relationships, we can bring more people into the fold, and it can have this multiplier effect, which, Liz and Deena, it can fuel this flywheel that I've been talking about and creating this self-perpetuating cycle of advocacy and community building.
Well, we're huge fans. I mean, Deena, I know that we've seen so much overlap happening between, there was always overlap, right? But I think now, anytime you're going to talk advocacy, anytime you're going to talk community, you're going to have to talk the entire landscape and understand how those two things relate to each other, right, Deena?
Yeah, I mean, there for sure always has been overlap. Your customers who are in your community, there's some of them that are going to have been in your advocacy program, but I won't say that the overlap has always been amicable. There has been community and advocacy living on their own, not just even islands, but continents, doing their own thing. We've encountered like this kind of like territorial type of reaction sometimes when we come into an organization and start talking about advocacy and look a little more holistically. But I think that the tide, to your point, Liz, the tide has kind of started to turn now to where it is like, okay, there is this symbiotic relationship between community and advocacy. And it's up to us as the practitioners, if you have someone managing community and someone managing advocacy, to figure out what that looks like and how you work together. Or if you are kind of steering the whole ship, how do you create this kind of flywheel mentality within the portfolio of programs, including community and advocacy?
I would say you're spot on, Deena, where depending on where you work, there can be this red tape where you stay in your lane, I stay in my lane. But when we're really thinking about like, how do we drive the business forward? I think that mentality is out of scarcity mindset. And I'm looking at this through abundance. Like, how do we help each other win at the end of the day? And so to your point, this flywheel really helps us understand at what point, when do we have touch points with the same customers? Because typically we're touching the same people. And at what point do, each team come in? And one of the things I love what we've done here at CoTramp is that when I joined, there's this strong ethos around community and this love for customers. And so we all share this responsibility to making sure that what we say internally is doubling down on customer love, which was one of our strategic priorities at CoTramp. And so when I started 2 years ago, and I can be loquacious, so please stop me because I love this. I can talk about this all day long.
I told you it's DeMario Day. You talk, DeMario.
I love all things. Our customers are great. I mean, and when I say I'm saying that colloquially, like our customers, we know that they will evangelize for our brands in unimaginable ways when we drive value for them. So my point in that is when I joined CoTramp, I wanted to know who are our customer marketers. So who are on our customer marketing team and who manages our customer advocacy program, because I knew that there was this strategic relationship that we could develop. And I just want to just preface by saying we're still on our journey as well. And so I don't want to come on here and make it seem like we've solved this at CoTramp, but want to share with my peers is that we're right in the trenches with you. And we know that we have some aggressive goals at our organization. And so it makes no sense for us to duplicate what we're doing when we can just band together and go forth. So.
Oh my goodness. That speaks to us, when we start engagements with organizations, and typically, whether we're starting from the community side or the advocacy side, we're looking and we're saying, okay, first things first, look at what other programs exist. And are you going to be duplicating effort here. There's no need to duplicate effort if something is already being offered and given to clients, just to create something that you can control and own on your own. But collaboration is hard. And DeMario, I want to get into, okay, but you've kind of cracked some of that. And I think people want to know, like, okay, what's this flywheel, DeMario?
Yeah. So let me talk about it. And I'm so excited. Before I talk about the flywheel, and share about like what does it mean and how we've operationalized that at ColdTramp, I want to share a little bit about my background, which I've alluded to before. So before joining ColdTramp, I worked in development and alumni relations and higher education. And in some universities, these functions are integrated into one department, while in others, they operate separately. And so this experience, it taught me about this holistic perspective around holistic engagement. That's the point I'm trying to make. And for those who are unfamiliar with development and alumni relations and higher education, it involves around building and maintaining relationships with alumni donors and other supporters to secure financial support to the institution. And so this might include organizing alumni campaigns, donor stewardship events, alumni events to make sure that they feel this connection to the university. Or as we simply say, as my fellow fundraisers, engaging someone through their time, talent, and treasure. And so this is similar to community and customer advocacy in that both focus on cultivating and stewarding relationships with customers who are part of our own network and ecosystem. And so one of the things I've noticed at ColdTramp when I joined a couple of years ago, and I shared this with you, that we're not on the same team. We're all a part of the global marketing practice, but community reports to brand marketing. We were reporting to field marketing when I started. And actually, advocacy was also in field marketing, but then they just broke us up, which just broke my heart into a million little pieces. But as I mentioned earlier, we all play like this big role in customer advocacy and community. So I look at things, let me get to your point, Liz. I look at things through the lens of like pipeline building. And when I worked in alumni relations, we use that term a lot. And that helps us identify like at what stage is a donor and alum in the engagement process. And so when I joined the community team at ColdTramp, I was thinking about, now I know that we have some passionate and engaged customers who are in our community. How do we tap into that? But before I could even do that, Deena and Liz, there was some like work I had to do and like clean up. I had to make sure that the community felt like a community. We had stronger relationships with them, and that it was the right time to tap into those. And something, Liz, that you mentioned when I first met you a couple of years ago, looking at it like a savings account, and you accrue interest over time, and being able to make those strategic withdrawals. And that's how I was thinking about that, because a person might be great, but that might not be the right moment to tap into them. And so then when I was meeting with my customer advocacy team, I was thinking about like, I understand their goals and I understand where they're trying to go. How do I help fuel more folks to them? So let me get into the components of this flywheel that I've talked about. And I'm going to read some of my notes with you. So there are 5 components to this flywheel, and I'm going to run through them. So the first one is attracting new members. So we talked about how community is just one entry point into this flywheel, but it's not the only entry point. It could be customer success. It could be customer support. It could be an event. But for the sake of our conversation, I'm going to talk about like how I've created this for those who enter our Culture First community. So for us, it's thinking about like who's coming into the community. It can't be just 40 people. It has to be the right 40 people. And for those right 40 people, at what stage do they become like potential advocates for us? So that's the attraction piece. The identification piece is recognizing who's highly engaged in our community, who will evangelize for our brand because they're intrinsically motivated by it. And then the last piece of that, who's willing to advocate. So that's that propensity part, like who's willing to do that. And as folks move along this flywheel, so those are the first 2. The third is nurturing those relationships. So for us, we believe in being community led. So making it more about them and less about us. So like, how do we drive more value for our customers who are in our community? And that could I look at it through the lens of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if anyone is familiar. And if, at the bottom, part of that pyramid is basic needs. And so I look at that, when I think about community and just advocacy in general, is just like rewards and incentives, the basic things like swag and et cetera. But at the top of that is like self-actualization. And we know that our community members and our advocates, they also want to have their voices amplified and to expand their brand. And so like, how do I work them through that pyramid to get from that bottom layer to self-actualization? That's that third piece of nurturing relationships. So you can involve them in several programs, your customer advocacy program, your ambassador program. If you run a chapters program, you can do that. If you run a CAB, a customer advisory board, you can engage them in that. And then the last piece of that is leveraging those networks. So coming back to say, hey, Deena, hey, Liz, I know that you love Cold Tramp. I know that you love Captivate Collective. Who else should we be talking to? And if you've nurtured those relationships right, this won't sound like a sale or a pitch. They'll be like, oh my God, Deena, Liz, this is exactly who you should be talking to because you've nurtured that relationship. And then they might tap into 3 or 4 or 5 people into their networks. And now you have 5 new people who are now into your community. And I'm using community in this context is lowercase c community. So the act of building community. So that's how it's worked here at Cold Tramp. And to give some folks the numbers, excuse me, when I started Cold Tramp in 2022, our community, when we think about just like pipeline and attribution back to the business, we were generating around $430,000 back to the business, which is a big number, for some folks who have a scrappy community team. But we knew that if we came in and implemented this flywheel, that we could do more, do better. In 2023, we were able to increase that number to $1.9 million back to the business just by doing the right things and engaging our right stakeholders and leveraging our advocates to go out and evangelize for our brand. And so there are multiple people who have a role in this flywheel. And so as you can see by the numbers, we've been able to make some improvement in that way. I'm looking at the numbers now. We're on track to be at $3 million by this year. And so it's just that making sure that, A, that you have the right people that you're bringing at the right time. And then B, as well, making sure that you're building those right internal relationships. So I'll cut it there because I've said a lot.
Well, that's great. And thank you for breaking down your methodology for folks listening to this. I think that's really helpful. And I know it's going to spur a lot of questions. But first of all, congratulations. Those are some impressive numbers. I know people are going to want to know how you're measuring those numbers. But before we get to that, I know the next question, DeMario, is going to be like, okay, so you talked about getting people in the community. So that's a whole function in and of itself. And I'm talking big C community because that's what we're focusing on here. And then how to identify, and you talked about moving them through that hierarchy of needs. So how are you going about, DeMario, first of all, identifying the potentials, then moving them through that hierarchy of needs until it's time to say, invite them to programs outside of the big C community, Culture Amp community, into other programs that will be able to fulfill some of that self-actualization in a more concentrated manner for a smaller amount of people?
Love that question. And I want to first say automation. Automation.
I'm so glad we don't have to do this manually. Yes, tell us more.
Those days are over. At least I hope they're over for a number of people. But for us, we've come out the Stone Age, and so automation has been really, really a key partner to us. So we leverage Common Room, which is a customer intelligence platform. And so Deena and Liz, Common Room allows us to look across multiple signals to see where our customers and our community members are engaging with our brand beyond our community program. And so those signals, we can look at LinkedIn, Twitter, or X now, Facebook, GitHub, Discourse, Slack, Bevy, all these signals we can pull to see like, what's the sentiment of our customers, whether in their community, our community, or not in our community. And I would say this at Cold Tramp, we look at community as wherever you interact with our brand, you're part of our community. And so Common Room helps us create this 360 profile of an individual. So it could say, well, here is DeMario Bell. He's a first gen. He works at Cold Tramp. He loves potato chips. He's engaged in this community. So you're able to see like all these touch points here. And so for us, I also work with Common Room to leverage their feature called impact points. So some people might look at this like how you're able to look at engagement, but impact points. What I love about this is not only looking at the quantity of engagement, but it's leveraging AI to look at sentiment analysis. And we know that AI is not perfect, so I don't want to tell people to look at that as your end all be all. But I'm able to work with my partners at Common Room to really identify some of the type of things that we want to look at. So it's a Likert scale for impact points, 1 to 10, 1 being least impactful, 10 being most impactful. And so how we look at that at the higher end of that, more active engagement. So posts, responses, LinkedIn comments, product reviews. And so then we set up automations to tag these members based on their behavior and the number of impact points. So if I say that if a member has 500 impact points at least, throw them into this segment here. And so I'm looking at their profiles to better understand that. And so some of those use cases on how we use some of that segmentation could be advocacy. Oh, this person will be great for our customer advocacy board. They're a VP of HR. They've been a user of CodeTramp for X number of years. They've done X, Y, and Z with us. Let's put them into this segmentation. Another could be reviews, G2 at Capterra, referrals or product feedback. So we love Common Room because it really helps us to automate some of that tedious way of identifying folks, which could really, really take a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like key to that automation piece is clear definition. That you would need to be able to define what are the set of signals, what is the set of data that needs to be present, and when that definition of advocate or advocate level 1, 2, or 3, however you define it, whenever that appears, then what is the pathway forward? So there's a really interesting dimension to automation that comes back to definition that I think is sometimes overlooked. Sometimes in the work that we do, we really have to start out a deliverable or an asset with key terms and definitions so that we are all singing from the same song sheet as we go forward.
Oh, Deena, I love that you mentioned that, because one of the things that I say to my colleagues when we talk about advocacy, one of the things I often ask them is like, well, how do you define advocacy? Because I might think of advocacy totally differently than you, Deena, and we might all have 3 different definitions on what we think advocacy is. So to your point, the software is just the tool. It's like the enablement piece, but it's not your program. It's not the framework. It allows you to implement your framework. So to your point, once you're clear on how are we defining advocacy, then you can put those systems in place to help you do that.
Right. What are the right definitions for your organization, for the outcomes that you're looking to drive, for the customers that you have in your community or in your database? That everyone's definition probably should be slightly different.
Of course, because our customers are slightly different. I mean, they are different. They're not slightly, but they are differently,
Individual human beings? No way. Okay. So, DeMario, this is so interesting, right? Because I think it's really forward thinking. It's like bringing into the organization, thinking through, and I know you're kind of on that line of, is it B2C, is it B2B? Like you get to play in that mixed field. And so what I love is I am feeling this B2C type of draw of we're listening, we're doing the 360 view, and then we are orchestrating your experiences based on that 360 view.
Yeah.
Now, you can measure anything though, right? Like there are millions of touch points that each individual has. How did you guys go about deciding which touch points to measure or track? And how do you define which are the most important?
Oh, that's a great question. And we're still on that journey. And so for us, some of the things that we wanted to measure for us is, I was looking at tenure in the case of community, looking at tenure in community. How long have they been in our community? The second one was engagement. So looking at number of posts, the quality of those posts. Of course, we're looking at, ACV as well. That's another piece. And it's all coming to me. It's in my notes. I forgot my notes.
Oh, you're
And then, so
it's not a
engagement,
test.
we look at engagement, tenure, re-engagement, and sentiment for this flywheel altogether. We weren't stuck on a particular number, so it wasn't just like we had to have a particular number. For us, it was, do we have the quality? Because once we have the quality, then we can use that as a framework and then scale from there. I will say this is our first year of trying this. Next year, if you have me back, I can share more about some of those measurements. But I would say for folks who are really thinking about, like, how do you measure the efficacy of this? Am I on the right track? Are you moving those folks through this pipeline or through this flywheel in an efficient manner? So let's just say if I'm starting with 100 folks who are in this segment that I've created around, let's just say, product reviews. I've identified 50 people from community who can give me a product review. Can I look back at that and, say, oh, at least 50% of those did actually give us a product review. So I can count that as a success. Now, if I go back and say, well, only 2 of those 50, then there's something wrong there. So I got to go back to my definition to see as well. So.
Mm-hmm. And then I think it's so interesting because the data builds on itself. So that fact that they gave you the product review then becomes another data point. And then maybe you will find that, oh, this person always, or 90% of the time, does take the opportunity to do that product review when it's in front of them. We have a technical advisory board. This is probably a really good candidate. So every interaction becomes a listening or a touch point, and then it's figuring out how do we direct people based on their interests and based on what they're telling us through their actions is interesting to them.
Yeah, I thank you for summing that up. That's so true because, Liz, what we think that a person might want to, how we think someone might want to engage with our brand might not be the way. So some people might think, oh, and I just want to say, like, the flywheel, don't be tethered to that. Like, there are other opportunities outside of that. To your point, like, listen to what they're telling you, because you might think it is a cab and it might not be a cab. Maybe they enjoy resharing your post on LinkedIn. Maybe they feel more comfortable, creating user-generated content, and they just don't have the time to be a part of a cab. But you'll learn that, about them. So.
I love that little nugget there, which is don't be tied. You have to test and play and find out what works, and don't be tied to any one formula, because no even group of people is just homogenous. They have individual personalities, they have interests, their life experiences totally dictate their amount of free time that they have. How busy are they at home? Are they shy? Are they introverted, extrovert? There's so many different things that influence. Maybe we'll start doing Enneagram tests on people, and we'll build that as touch points into the data points into how we interact with them. Wouldn't that be so awesome? See, I'm all about
that idea came to me. I said, wait, Liz, you might be onto something here. Actually, I hadn't even thought about that.
We start making customers take personality tests before we interact with it. It's not a bad idea. You get some incentive for taking a personality test. All right, let's keep going, because this is such good stuff, DeMario. So I want to move on. And so this flywheel that you're talking about, I know we talked about this, but are you willing to share?
Oh, I can. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
He's made his own graphics, so I know we don't normally share screens on here, but if you have it up, DeMario.
I have it up. Let me share my screen. Oh my goodness.
Sorry for people on the podcast version, but we will put it in the show notes so that you can take a peek at his flywheel there.
Thank you, Liz. Yes. So that's right. We talked about it. So let me just walk folks back through this again. And so this is the flywheel that we've created. And this is I wanted to simplify this so that it didn't get too complicated. But the starting point when we talked about this is that attracting new members, or that discovery piece. And as you can see along this flywheel is that it all connects to each other. So for us, it's thinking about community initiatives. How do we create this welcoming environment to attract new people into that? That's that entry point. The second piece is identifying potential members. So looking at like, how do we engage that? What are those personal connections? So I talked about common room is that way that allows us to identify what that personal connection piece. It might not always be me, it might be one of our customer success coaches. It could be a peer. The other is, as we move along this flywheel, is touch point 3, which is then nurturing those relationships. You know that you want to build a relationship with this person. So I know that, Deena, you would make a great um, potential advocacy. So I need to think about like, how now do I nurture this relationship? So for me, I always have my fundraiser hat on. So if I know that Deena just moved, it might be sending some flowers or something saying, hey, Deena, congrats on your move. We're thinking of you. So that's nurturing that relationship. Or if I know that we have an upcoming speaking opportunity, and I know that Liz has been super engaged in our community, it's reaching out to Liz to say, hey, I know that you've talked about this a lot in our community. Would you be interested in coming on our stage to talk about that? That's another way to nurture those relationships. And I gave you 2 different examples there. And then as you move along, that is now you've noticed that this relationship has progressed. I have like a real relationship with you, Liz. I have a real relationship with you, Deena. I know that our relationship is not transactional and that you really care about us. So then when we talk about, again, that Maslow hierarchy of needs, self-actualization. Hey, Deena, would you be interested in serving on our customer advisory board? It's a group of fellow chief customer officers who are all coming together to talk about like, how do we drive customer, success at our organizations? Here are some of the people who you can expect to participate. So making it sound like this fear of missing out. And it could be coming back, Liz, we have our big annual conference coming up. We love for you to headline. And so that's that engagement piece. So it's like tailoring those activities based on those particular needs. And then the 5th part of that, which is the ultimate action of this flywheel, which is then coming back. Now that I've shown you that I care about you, Liz and Deena, who else should we be talking about? And that could look through referrals, references, content sharing, and then a number of ideas. Going back to Deena's point, however you define advocacy at your organization. For us, that ultimate action was going back to our community to say, hey, who else, in our networks, who we should be talking about when we think about, culture map. And then that cycle just continues to perpetuate itself. So this is the flywheel here from us here at Culture Amp.
Thank you, DeMario. Thanks. I put you on the spot for sharing, and I'm so glad that you did, because the visual really helps to bring it to life. And what I love is that there's such a heavy nurture component before you get to even maybe having them inside of a program, right? You need to get them to the place where it makes sense for them to join that program. Yeah. And I think what I love about the visual is when we think about the synergy between community and advocacy programs, community is broad, right? Like people are in the community for many, many, many different reasons. This is a great fertile ground for listening, understanding, and discovery, what we call discovery of your individual customers, to understand what are their interests, what do they want to do, how do we love on them, like just discovering how do we love on them. Yeah. And hopefully how we do that at scale when we can. Yeah. And then you get to the point where it's like, okay, how do we get to them discovering that these people are the perfect match for this program and these people are the perfect match for that program. So this is our broad base of learning and discovery and nurture, and then moving them through that. And I think where there could be more collaboration is even on that nurture piece, right? So if community is doing a lot of the discovery and advocacy programs are doing a lot of activation, it's like they should come together and think through how they can nurture people through to that, oh, now it's the opportune time to get them even further involved.
Yeah, I love how you said that, Liz. And it had me thinking about something that we didn't talk about here, but you and I, we talked about when we were planning for this, which was, we talked about like, entry points and how community might be that one entry point, but it's not the only entry point that someone might have. And shoot, my thoughts slipped me, but it'll come back. But I love how you spoke about that, because it's so true. It's community is just one part of that. It's not the only part, but it is that place for discovery. And I love how you said that, like, how do we love on them? Because that's what we want to do. That's the idea of community. They believe in what we believe in. And how do we just go from there? And so, as we've talked about, like, I look at community as the entry point. Like, you have these amazing people who have raised their hands to be a part of your community, and now create this bi-directional conversation between you and them back to the organization, because they'll tell you what they want. And I'll say this, and not to go on a tangent, but I tell people, what makes a great, community builder, customer marketer is someone who has business acumen. Like, you understand where the business is trying to go, and then the other piece is like thinking like a product manager. Like, how do you create an experience that keeps people coming back? So I always think about those two when I think about like attributes of like, how do you make sure that you're driving value? So
that's great. And I think what you were probably, I'm not going to say what you were trying to say, DeMario, was just like, yeah, there are other entry points.
Yeah.
But big C or little c, community is one of the broadest entry points that you have into the organization, right? It is a little different for segmented programs that have specific outcomes they're trying to drive. Community is sort of for everybody.
Yeah.
And even though not everyone will participate in an online community, anyone can participate in little c community just by raising their hand, as long as that community structure is there and there's opportunities for them to engage. But they're really, the organization isn't asking a lot or anything in return for you to participate in community. The asks and the level and the balance of give and take, I think, grows as you move up, right? Through those different programs as they become more specific. Yeah. But community is like the ultimate gateway or the ultimate entry point.
I agree. You couldn't have said it better.
Yeah. Deena, do you have anything to add to that?
I do. Just absorbing the flywheel. Something that occurred to me is this really is about a shift from treating our customers like they are at the world's biggest buffet, the world's biggest schmorg. Come on in. Here's everything you can do. We hope that you want to do stuff. Pick some stuff to do. Thank you so much. Hope you like the food here. This is like a shift to table service.
Yeah.
This is like,
it's like, I had a conversation with you. I understand what your preferences are for culinary.
It's like, yes, you're at the chef's table.
Yes.
And we're going to curate a menu for you. You might not even like everything on that menu, but we're going to curate that menu for you. We're going to treat you like you matter. And hopefully we hit the mark. That's a big shift. That's a big shift for how a lot of people have been approaching advocacy. It's like we're taking back the doing of the work a bit. Yeah. We're using tools and systems to help us do the work, but we're not relying on our customers to do the work for us anymore by being on this choose your own adventure, self-select your advocacy journey. We're taking on some of the onus of doing that work and figuring out what to put on that menu for them.
Wasn't that like so amazing, Liz, that Deena said that? Because it made me feel like it painted like a whole picture for me. It is very true, Deena. It's like, I know you. Like, when I come to you, I know you. So it isn't like, oh, Deena, here's like 6 things that you can be involved in. But it's just like, Deena, based on what I've seen, here are the top who are the top 1 or 2 things that I know that you would love. So it's good to know, and it's beyond just the work, like Deena, the chief customer officer, but like Deena, the person, because the title is what you do, but it's not who you are. So it's also looking at like, what are you reacting to, responding to, posting about, and other aspects, of your social media as well. Something I was just talking to a colleague about last week at work is this white glove experience. Like, how do you provide that white glove experience? And so, which is, very important.
And I think if we go further with the analogy, which I love, is like, we got away with buffets. In fact, they were super great. I mean, who doesn't love a good buffet? And in fact, they're very hard to find now. So now they're not many people after COVID doing buffets, but it was like a lot of food for cheap, right?
Yes. It's true.
It did serve a purpose. But I think the change, like, you have to look at the market and you have to understand the shift. And when everyone started offering buffets. So when all your competitors started offering buffets, when every technology tool that your customer interacts with starts giving people options for what they can participate in and eat, right? And then you start to have to differentiate how you approach your offering, how you approach setting in front of them their opportunities with you. And that's where you want to stand out. And so if everyone's doing a buffet, you want to do a fine dining experience because
Yeah.
that's what's going to stand out. And a fine dining experience, depending on, some people love buffets. Let's just be honest. Some people want the buffet, but then some people love coming in and saying and seeing that the work has been done for them, or that I don't have to do the mental exercise of deciding what I should be eating because
Yeah.
you have listened to me. I don't eat seafood. Sorry, guys. Love the fish.
Same.
Don't like anything else. But now I can put in front of you what I know. I'm not wasting your time putting all these other things on the menu that I am not going to eat. So that is a very different experience. And I think it's now necessitated because there's so many options for every single client to participate in across all the technology that they use.
Yeah. I have 3 notes to respond to that.
Okay,
list.
bring us home, DeMario. Bring us home.
Let me bring us home, because you're absolutely right. And I would say that even outside of this flywheel, just because the flywheel indicates that I should interact with you, also trust your gut. It might be the data's telling me one thing, but I know maybe not right now. So I just want to say that part there. So 3 points to bring us home when we talk about this flywheel. Buy-in is important, especially if you're not wanting to operate in a silo and to do this at scale. So co-create this flywheel, not only with other internal stakeholders, bring some of your advocates along that as well, to make sure that you have this design thinking perspective in mind when we think about, like, if you were me, or not even if you were me, as someone who knows us, does this resonate with you? So that you're not building something that isn't, to Deena's point, that it does not have your company's print on it. The other thing is, I want to remind folks, like, we're not talking about like transactional relationships here. We're talking about meaningful and authentic relationships, people who we know are ready to be advocates. So I don't want also folks to think about this has to be like some reciprocity. You do something for me, I do something for you. But it's just like, I know you. And I know our relationship is going to be for the long game. So how do we make sure that we're getting value? That's the third piece. And then the last thing is, I tell people is, and I said this at a talk back in April. And when I worked in higher ed, I used to say that, the angry alum is not the bad alum, because they still care. How do you tap around that passion and connect them to the things that they care about? And I even say the same thing for our advocates. Even the customer who's upset with your product, who's upset with you, there's something there. And you can tap into that and flip that around. You have Deena, you have Liz, you have myself to really listen. And customers, they just want to be heard. Whether you act on it or not, they just want to be heard. So I also want to say that buy-in is important when you're thinking about this flywheel. Don't discard, the folks who are disgruntled. You can tap into that. If you struggle with that, you have Captivate Collective here. You have resources you can tap into that can help you. Wait, now Deena and Liz, you can say, wait, DeMario, don't sign us up for something.
No, I was just thinking, oh, how lovely. DeMario's doing a pitch for us. Thank you.
I'll take it.
What you all do is amazing. When I started off, Captivate Collective was an amazing resource to me, remain an amazing resource. But this is genuine. Like, you all did not ask me, like, genuinely, you've been a great resource. And then the other piece is shifting from transactional to relational. That's the main point we're trying to, double down when we think about this flywheel.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And relational, like you said, there's scale and there's technology behind that. But how do you use that technology to really understand people, make people feel seen? And then when you can, and when it's appropriate, you do build that one-to-one. The technology is to allow you, DeMario, to build real relationships with people, which at the end of the day, that's your secret sauce, right? And so the technology is absolutely important because DeMario doesn't scale, and but you can't do without DeMario. And so we have to have this synergy of technology and skilled relationship builders. And I think that's what makes the practice so hard. You have to understand scale and technology now, and you have to be a relationship builder and understand how people tick. And those two things sometimes don't go together. But when they do, with someone like DeMario, and then you have some real magic. And I think the numbers speak for themselves with DeMario and the progress he's been able to make in just a year. That's absolutely fantastic. We're so proud of you. I am so proud of you. I just started seeing your name everywhere, and I was like, I know DeMario. I know this guy. He's the nicest person in the world. Let's have him come talk to us about what he's doing. So thank you, DeMario, for being on here. This was a fantastic talk.
So fun.
I can't wait to share it out with the world and get people to hear everything that you've done. I know it's very valuable, especially for both sides of the fence, for sure. But for you community managers out there who are what we call advocacy minded, I think that this is an especially valuable talk. So DeMario, we thank you so much for being here, and we cannot wait to see what else you do.
Thanks you so much.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening in. Bye-bye.